Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're very honored and privileged to have Rabbi Simon Jacobson and Dr. Yaron Brook. Kind of anyone I mentioned, these two tonight, whether they were my philosophy friends from undergraduate or my kind of religious friends from back home in Johannesburg, I got equally kind of astounding responses. And so it really is a great honor. So thank you for having us. And Julian and I are honored to be involved. Without any further ado, we'd love to kick things off simply by asking Dr. Yaron Brook. I think my guess is that people on this call probably have a better understanding of the basic Jewish philosophies than they do of basic objectivist philosophy. So we'd love to just give Dr. Yaron Brook an opportunity to summarize for us kind of what is objectivism broadly, and how do you relate to it in this day and age?
Sure. So again, thank you for inviting me. This is a real pleasure, and I'm looking forward to this. And thank you to Mallory Factor for having the idea of doing this and for getting together with you guys. So objectivism is a philosophy articulated by Ayn Rand, discovered by Ayn Rand. It is a philosophy, as any philosophy, it's complex and very broad. So I'm going to very much essentialize this in a few basic principles. It's the idea that reality is what it is. It is not invented by us. It is not a product of our consciousness, but neither is it a product of any other consciousness. Reality is what it is, and it is not changed by wishes or prayers or desires. Human beings have the mechanism, the tool to know reality, to discover reality, to discover truth. And that tool is reason. Reason is man's basic means of survival. It's how we deal with the world and how we survive as a species and as individuals. And then only individuals reason. There is no such thing as a collective consciousness. We certainly learn from other people, but nobody can do the thinking for us. Individuals are the unit of measure. They are the ones, each one of us is responsible for our own thinking and therefore for our own life. So in morality, Ayn Rand follows Aristotle. The purpose of morality is to help guide the individual towards his own happiness. That doesn't mean disregarding other people, treating other people badly, exploiting other people. Quite the contrary. It means trading with them in value for value, win-win kind of relationships. But it also means that you're not exploited by other people. You don't sacrifice to other people. You live for your happiness, and you involve other people to the extent that enhances your happiness. You as an individual are responsible for your own values, responsible for acting, and as long as you're not violating other people's rights by using force or committing fraud against them, the state should leave you alone. The only job of government is to protect individual rights. In that sense, there should be a complete separation of state from economics, state from education, state from science, and state from religion and ideas more broadly. So that's kind of the four fields of philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and politics, in a very kind of essentialized sense.
So to go straight to the point, look, one thing we all have in common, I believe, that are all online here, we're all Jewish. Is that correct? I believe so. So I will talk from my experience and my body of knowledge, which goes back to Jewish thought and Jewish history and Jewish tradition, really thousands and thousands of years. So to sum up, also in broad strokes, this issue of individuality versus collective, the good of the whole versus the good of the individual, which does not mean that they're mutually exclusive, obviously, but they could be, is a debate that goes back literally thousands and thousands of years in Jewish thought. I would say even from the beginning of it all, the way the Bible puts it, Adam and Eve, but specifically when you read the biblical accounts, and especially as they were elaborated upon, this was something that concerned everyone from the beginning. You know, on one hand, using Torah language, the human being was created in the divine image, a singular entity, not a part of a herd, not part of a group, an individual. And as a matter of fact, from a Torah point, a Jewish point of view, it's actually endowed with divine nature, whatever that means. But it's definitely a unique individual, which is distinct from another individual. To use words from the Talmud, no two people think alike, no two people look alike. Everybody has their unique element. And yet at the same time, Judaism struggles with the other side of the coin, which is, what about our obligation to each other? Are we part of a community? Should we all just be doing our thing? And when there's conflict, we figure out how to negotiate it? Or is there an inherent responsibility to each other? And interesting way that Judaism reconciles it is by saying it's not a contradiction. And I'll just use a simple analogy, the analogy of nature itself, which isn't man-made. Nature itself is exactly that. The human body is made up of 30 to 75 trillion cells, thousands of different systems, organs, faculties, and so on. If you dissected the human body and put it out on a table, it would all seem to be completely individual and independent of each other: the heart, the brain, the liver, the kidneys, the digestive system, the circulatory system, and so on. And they come together in a healthy body and with a certain symbiosis and harmony, which does not compromise the individual. On the contrary, if the heart tried to behave like the brain, that would be destruction. If the brain tried to be like the liver, that would be destruction. And yet there seems to be some invisible conductor, and I use that word very deliberately, like a symphony, where you have different musicians, different sounds. Each one must play their instrument. They're not supposed to play someone else's instrument. They have to live up to their calling, their destiny. And yet there's some harmony that allows them to also recognize that we complement each other. So there's a fundamental necessity for complementing the other without compromising the other. But here's where it gets interesting. Both these extremes can also be abused. We see, for example, that the idea of herd mentality and conformity, especially in religion, in many ways annihilated, and I use that strong word, and undermined individuality. If people, so to speak, tried to think open-minded thinking, they were maybe excommunicated. On the other hand, you could have the other extreme. You could have fierce individuality that compromises others. You know, if two people have different reasoning and maybe both are legitimate, they can contradict. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. History is fraught with war. War between two sides. Each one thought that based on their perspective, they were right. Now, some of them were malicious, and we could all agree perhaps that they were evil, but you know what? That could also be quite subjective. So the fact is that since both extremes can be abused and can go to a point where they can actually conflict with each other, that is why in Jewish thought, the ultimate reconciliation is the same way it works in the human body and in nature. The symbiosis is ultimately, the balance is controlled by a thing called humility. Secondly, we're not machines. I am a man of reason. I make constant mistakes based on my emotions. We have impulses. If we were computers and we could just rule things by programming, yeah, that would be nice, but it's not the case. Everybody has a certain uniqueness and indispensability to them, which I'd like to finally conclude is when you look at the Declaration of Independence and you see, it's interesting, the founding fathers, who by no means advocating religion, nevertheless, they use the word creator twice. All men are created equal. Let's call it all people are created equal. Make sure that it means everybody. And secondly, by the creator, endowed by the creator with unalienable rights. Why do they have to use creator, which can create the confusion, separation, church and state? Yaron referred to it. I've never really found an answer. My only personal answer, and maybe it's open to interpretation, that perhaps in their wisdom they understood that if you don't have an absolute creator guaranteeing it, and if it's just guaranteed by a few legislators, then you know what? One day someone can say some people are more equal than others. So by putting it the word creator, just like the insurance policies have the word by other acts of God, because God is a great scapegoat where you can just say, if there's a hurricane or a tornado or a tsunami, God is responsible. So in the same sense, they introduce that concept to give it an absolute element that no one can ever come and say that some individuals, the minorities, are perhaps less equal.
There's a lot here. The Rabbi just said a lot, and I, maybe surprising, or not surprising, I disagree with most of it, or at least approach it from a very different perspective, right? I find the body analogy scary. The heart and the kidneys don't have free will. They don't have a purpose of their own. They don't have their own life, their own goal, their own thing. They are completely subservient. Their purpose is completely the well-being of the organism. So while I agree there's absolutely great value in individuals being individuals, but living in harmony, that a harmony exists between them, I think the idea that my purpose as an individual is to help the body, society, the world in X way, and his is in Y way, and this is all dictated from above, is authoritarian, and I think quite dangerous. So I accept the idea of people living in harmony, and I think that's key to us living in a society, and we can talk about what creates that harmony. But I think there's real danger in assuming that you need to be the heart and I need to be the lungs, and we've got a job to do for society. And again, that places society above all else. And we talk about the good of the whole. Well, what does that mean, right? Since the whole there is no whole, really. The whole is just a collection of individuals. What is this good that is an abstraction above the whole? I am very suspicious of any claims of people who know what the good of the whole is, because I don't know what the whole is. What I know is that when individuals are left free to pursue their own lives, free of, and what we do is guarantee that they cannot use force and coercion against one another, that people generally are better off, that society, to the extent that we can define such a unit, are better off. They're not better off because the people are serving the whole. They're better off because people are living the best lives that they can be. And the only purpose of having a whole, in my view, is to leave people free to pursue their own happiness. What is there beyond human individual happiness? What is there that the whole represents that's more than the happiness of the individual? I often use Abraham in my talks, but not for a positive example, but for a negative example. Because I consider Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son to be a moral evil. I think it is fundamentally wrong and an example of moral authoritarianism. And the idea, again, of commandments, of a system from above that we must live by and we must follow and we must obey, not through reason, not through explanation. No explanation is given to Abraham of why he should sacrifice his son. He needs to sacrifice it, and because he's commanded to do so. I reject the idea because I reject the idea that there is a conductor, but I reject the idea that there should be a conductor over my life. My life is mine to live as I see fit. And again, as long as I don't hurt you, you have no business in my life. And now I do believe that if we all act rationally, if we all act in our own rational long-term self-interest, which is the kind of self-interest I'm talking about, our lives work in harmony. They work so that we're all better off. If we engage with one another on the basis of, I never want you to sacrifice to me or me to sacrifice to you. I want to create a win-win relationship with you so we're both better off, because that's the only sustainable long-term relationship. Then that's the kind of harmony we can achieve. Individualism doesn't mean, and self-interest doesn't mean, what I think convention applies to it. That is, people who want to live on a desert island and subordinate everybody else around them to themselves. That's not individualism, and it's not being self-interested. If you're really an individual and if you're really self-interested, you want to live a full life. You want to live a flourishing life. You want to live a great life. You want to live the best life available to you in this world. That's what it means. And if you don't believe in an afterlife, which I don't think you should, this is it. So you want to make the most of this one life that you live right here, right now. And that means, of course, you want to interact with other people because you learn from other people, you benefit from other people, you gain from other people. These win-win relationships make you a dramatically better person. You don't want to live on a desert island. You want to benefit from the interaction with the good wherever it can be found.
I will usually avoid words like dangerous and danger, but since Yaron did introduce it into the conversation, I will say the following. Maybe it comes down to a very simple equation. Do you worship yourself or do you worship something greater than yourself? I think worshiping oneself and one's ability to determine what is good as if they're completely objective and everyone will agree, I think can be quite dangerous. So we've seen a lot of dangers when that comes out of that. Not that I'm suggesting that anyone that is a fierce individual is a dangerous person, but we've seen plenty of damage. I will also acknowledge, and I actually stated it earlier, I've also seen great danger coming from authoritative approach and people trying to control others with not good intentions. That's why I threw in the word humility. The heart and the liver and the brain, yes, they don't have free will, which is also a debate, whether humans actually have free will or not. I mean, Isaac Bashevis Singer put it this way. He said, we must believe in free will. We have no choice. I think we all can agree that we need harmony within diversity. Now, what does that mean? We have parents who are very authoritative. They want their children to be just like them. And they will invalidate them, criticize them. There are millions of young and elderly people going to therapy right now because their parents basically screwed up their lives by imposing, by criticizing, taking away that free abandon. Then you have the other extreme. Parents who don't get involved at all. Do whatever you like. Children, do whatever you like. I think we all can agree that a healthy unit requires harmony within diversity. First of all, each individual in the family unit is different. Just like the heart and the liver and the brain. Not exclusively different, obviously. There's plenty of overlap. Probably 80, 90, or maybe more percent, they're similar, but there are differences. You can't educate a more cerebral child than, let's say, a more musical and artistic one. They have different skills and different needs. Reality is most people who are individuals, even if they're not that individualistic, do end up hurting others because self-interest by nature has that. But I'm not saying we can eliminate that because that's part of human nature. The question is ultimately, how do you create the healthiest organism? When I mean by organism, I mean in the broad sense, social organism. Now, one thing I want to say about a higher authority. From my perspective, it's not about listening to God. It's the other way around. It's if we were created a certain way, our nature of existence is that, for example, we need love. That's not something we determined. That's the human nature that a child needs love. We need to love. We need nurturing. So I'm not looking at God in the context of some invisible, a metaphysical entity, a God sitting with a white beard on a throne in heaven, striking us with lightning when we misbehave. You know, to use it this way, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev said it beautifully. He said to a self-proclaimed atheist, he said, you know, the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in. I think there's a very profound animosity to religion for good reason, because religion did abuse its authority, and I don't call that religion. So I think when we talk about religion, we have to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy. I actually don't even like the word religion, to be honest. I'm actually anti-religious. How do you like that? Because I'm anti the concept of someone imposing. I see it more as following the natural way we're here. There's a certain things that make us work. You put your hand in fire, it gets burned. That's an objective reality.
Yep.
Certain behavior, even if it's called individualistic, and you have the right to do so, free will tells you can do whatever you wish, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy.
I have a feeling one could argue, I'm not gonna, Gideon and I are here to be neutral, but one can argue that both sides here are being a bit disingenuous. And I'll explain. I've been watching Band of Brothers, rewatching, I did many years ago. It was a 10-part series on World War II, and I'm rewatching it over the last few days. Long story short, we are here today because many men and women put their reasons aside and fought for the collective, allowing us, some of us here, to try and maximize our objectivist priorities, our own reason. So many of us are reaping the benefit as objectivists that others have fought and died for. And there's others examples of that. We're driving on roads that other people's built and taxes paid to schools that we then benefit from. I must say, even within the Jewish community, it seems we often praise what I would argue is many of the collectivists, those who have tried to maximize their own life as much as possible, let's say business-wise, financially, the New York scene, optimizing banking, selling mortgage-backed securities, doing that whole route. And then maybe when they're 60 years old or a bit later on, then they start donating to shul, and all of a sudden it's about the collective. When in the meantime, their businesses, had some negative externalities for society. So the objectivists are benefiting from those who put their own reason aside. And on another side, let's say some within the Jewish community are benefiting from people who maximize their own reason without much care for the collective for much of their life. Does that resonate with you? I mean, maybe you might disagree with that. And Yaron, you're shaking your head, so maybe we'll start with you.
Some people, go to war to protect us, and aren't they sacrificing their lives for me? And shouldn't they be thankful? So first, let me say I'm thankful, but I'm thankful to them. As somebody who served in the military, right? I can also tell you that it's not clear to me that that's what they did. I don't think any single soldier out there was thinking about me when they fought their war. Who were they thinking about when they fought the war? And I'm assuming soldiers on the good guys' side. And I, maybe counter to the Rabbi, do like the words dangerous and good guys and bad guys and good and evil, because I think it's important to differentiate between. Most people who fought for, let me put it this way, most people who fought for a collectivist cause in history have done me and you damage, because most of them did bad stuff. Most wars are wrong. Most wars were not to establish freedom and build democracy or whatever. Most wars were horrific and bad and should have never been entered into. Who were they fighting for? I would argue they were fighting for themselves more than anything else. Now, again, here, it's important to think about what the concept of self means. The concept of self doesn't mean the biological cells that constitute my body, my heart, my liver, my soul. On. The constitutive self is who I am and what are my values. Do my values incorporate my family? Absolutely. I'm willing to fight for my family. I'm willing to risk my life for my family. I'm willing, in some cases, to die for my family, because life without them would not be worth living, because they are part of who I am. They are my values, part of my soul, right? Is freedom part of my values? Absolutely, freedom is part of my values. And if the choice was, am I willing to fight for my freedom and risk my life for my freedom? Absolutely. Am I willing to risk my life for my family's freedom? Absolutely. Would I be willing to die if the alternative was to be in a concentration camp? Absolutely. Why? Because I value my life, because I value my values, because I value me and the people I love and the people I care about. So if my purpose in life as a selfish, to use a term the Rabbi used, as a selfish individual, my purpose in life is to live, is to survive, just to be able to survive. How do I figure out how to survive? Because I do believe we have free will. I do not believe we're programmed with knowledge on how to survive. I think there's overwhelming evidence that we do not have a program to survive. I think if you drop me and the Rabbi in the Amazon jungle, it would be very difficult for us instinctually to survive. We'd have to use our reason and our free will in order to actually survive if we had no tools and nothing with us. So I look to nature in terms of what is necessary for me as a human being to survive, to thrive, to flourish, and ultimately to be happy.
The word in Judaism for mitzvot is not commandments, it's connections. It's very different. A command means someone outside of you is commanding you. A connection means that when you do it, you become a more connected human being to yourself, to your own spirit, to your own health, and to the health of others. When I speak to my father and my grandfather, when they were alive, I learned life advice from them. It was very valuable. Why? Now, sometimes we learn the hard way. We make our mistakes, and sometimes that's the only way to go. But if I could find someone that teaches me and says to me, I've been through difficult situations. Here are some of the tips that I learned. So some things we learn from experience and some things we do learn from others. But at the end of the day, it's about a system that works best in combining the balance between the individual and the collective.
An individual or somebody self-interested in the objectivist sense cares about himself as the primary. And because of that, cares about other people. Other people are part of my life. They're an essential part. And when I talk about win-win relationships, transactions, I'm not talking about, I'll give you a few shekel if you do me a favor. I'm talking about the constant exchange of material, but primarily spiritual values that individuals engage with one another in friendship, in love, in marriage, with our children, constantly. I mean, if my relationship with my wife was only I lose and she gains all the time, then it wouldn't be a good marriage. It's a good marriage because we feed off of each other. We benefit from one another. There's a synergy there. It's win-win. And it's not that we transact one-to-one on everything that we do. It's that we live in a way that we both are benefiting from our choices, from our decisions. I mean, when we do it well and when we do it right, when things are in harmony, then in a way that enhances each one of our lives and enhances both of our lives. But there is no both of our lives separate from each of our lives as individuals.
Yes, the mind and reason, from a Jewish point of view, I'm speaking, is considered the highest faculty, conscious faculty of the human being. So I think we all understand that from the beginning of time, especially when you start talking about Jewish literature, I mean, you know how many books were written, how many ideas were explored. The pioneers of so many of concepts that exist today, whether they're religious or not religious, originate what they call the people of the book. So I want to make it very clear that Judaism is driven by reason, but faith is not seen as the absence of reason. Faith is seen actually beyond reason. You know, if you're biased, if someone pays you off, you may not know it. If it's a family member, you are biased, even in a court of law. So we sometimes need others. That's why we have the statement, appoint a mentor, designate a friend to talk to consult, just like you'd go to a lawyer or an accountant. You wouldn't just base it on your judgment. They have more experience and a little more objectivity. When the Wright brothers determined that they're going to create a flying ship, and they went to investors, would you invest with them 150 years ago, 200 years ago, that we're going to create a ship that's going to fly in the sky? Insanity. But they believed in it. It was not just rational. It was something more than just the pure logic of reason, which will give you the pros and cons. But to make the decision, I'm going to invest $10 million in this business, is, I would argue, a combination of reason plus something more. Call it whatever you like. Judaism always respected that. And that's how it saw the human being making decisions, checking that subjectivity that we all have, making sure that you create the best possible result. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect because we're human beings. And as I mentioned and repeat again, many people have abused their own reason, they've abused their faith, they've abused others, as I mentioned earlier. I'm not denying that. And as a result has caused a lot of damage, frankly. Because I know many intelligent Jews who rejected Judaism precisely because they saw the corruption, they saw the bureaucracy. I frankly, just honestly, full disclosure, is because I recognized a deeper truth that resonated with me, like the music. I heard the music, so I was able to see beyond the corruption and the bureaucracy and the conformity and the mediocrity and the so on, and that whole attitude of imposition, that there's authorities and so on, because I found the music in my own life. So I want to just say in a concluding note that, and I say this to you, Yaron, I say it to everyone listening, I come from a school of thought that teaches that each human being is absolutely sacred. And your individuality is sacred. Even if it's not mine, it's yours. And God bless you, you should be able to live up to it in the fullest sense of the word. I have no doubt that also the synergy that comes with others is not just because it serves your values and needs, is because we all are part of some larger composition. And that is not a statement of an invisible God and so on. It's actually, to me, that's the most reasonable conclusion I come to when I look at life. The mysteries of life and death, history, why certain things continued and perpetuated. You know, everyone wants to know what's the scientific explanation why the Jewish people are here and the Romans and the Greeks and the Egyptians and so many others are not. I met the Dalai Lama and he asked me that question. He said to me, you know, I'm in exile. What is the secret? How did you people, the Jewish people, make it in exile without an empire, without money, without armies until recently? And I said, what do you think? He says, it's your faith. You were connected to something that was beyond logic and reason and science, beyond, not beneath. And that held you up even in the most difficult times. In the words of Viktor Frankl, man searched for meaning, that there's something deeper than just what we are conscious of. And I'm not saying this in any way, nobody has to accept what I'm saying. This is a purely my own sentiment. And that's why I embrace and feel without judgment in any way, every person on this earth. And I feel it's an honor, to me, it's the most distinct and sacred honor to be able to interact, cross-pollinate with you, Yaron, and with everyone that I ever meet. I think it's the richest and most majestic part of the human experience. And each of us should find our calling, and hopefully we can all help each other in the process.